This story begins with a man called Henry Every, who was a pirate, and he may not be as famous as some other pirates like Blackbeard or Bartholomew Roberts, but his brief career may have inspired those to take up their pirate life. Little is known about Every's early life. He went to sea at a young age, and he may have served in the Royal Navy before working as a slave trader in the early 1690s. In 1693, he reappears in the historical record as the first mate of the Charles II, which was a privateering vessel, and that was hired to plunder French shipping in the Caribbean. The mission was very slow to start, and from the beginning, the crew remained stuck in a Spanish port for several months without getting paid. And in May 1694, Every decided to capitalise on the poor morale by leading his disgruntled crew into a mutiny. Upon seizing the Charles II, he announced his intention to turn pirate, and he said, "I am the captain of this ship now," he supposedly said, and he also said that "I am bound to Madagascar with the design of making my own fortune, and that of all the brave fellows joined with me." Next, Every renamed the Charles II the Fancy, and he set a course toward the southern tip of Africa. Their first raid came soon when they ransacked 3 English merchant ships in the Cape Verde Islands. They continued to plunder their way along the African coastline for the next several months, capturing French and Danish ships and picking up new recruits. By the time the Fancy reached Madagascar in mid-1695, Every had a crew of 150 men. Every's early victories had won him the respect of his crew, but he wanted more. He learned that a Mughal Empire fleet was soon to set sail from the Red Sea port of Mocha on a voyage home to India, along with carrying Muslim pilgrims returning from their holy pilgrimage to Mecca. The armada included several merchant vessels which were filled with treasure, all of which were owned by the Grand Mughal of India himself. Even so, he knew he was no match for the Mughal fleet, so Every decided to join forces with 5 other captains: Thomas Dew, Richard Want, Joseph Varro, William Mayers, and Thomas Wake. Only a few days later, the pirates spotted the 25-ship Mughal convoy as it raced toward the open ocean. They took off in pursuit, burning or leaving behind their slower ships to keep pace. Most of the fleet slipped away, but the Fancy successfully ran down a lumbering escort vessel called the Fath Mahmadi. After a brief firefight, the ship surrendered and was relieved of some 50,000 British pounds worth of gold and silver. Every and his men resumed the hunt, and on September 7th, their 3 remaining pirate ships caught up with the richest prize in the whole of the Indian fleet, the Grand Mughal flagship, the Ganji Sawai. Unlike the Fath Mahmadi, the Ganji Sawai was more than capable of defending itself. It was the biggest ship in the whole of India, and boasted several dozen cannons, and had a complement of around 400 Fancy alongside the crippled Mughal ship and sent a boarding party scurrying onto its deck. A fierce hand-to-hand battle took part, but the Indian soldiers were driven back after their captain abandoned them. After Every and his pirates dispatched the leaderless Mughal resistance, the pirates sacked the Ganges Sawai and brutalized its passengers. The men were tortured, killed, and the women, including an elderly relative of the Grand Mughal, were raped. After having remained engaged for a week in searching for plunder, stripping the men of their clothes and dishonouring the old and young women, they left the ship and its passengers to their fate. Some of the women, in fact, got an opportunity, threw themselves into the sea to save their honour, while others committed suicide using knives and daggers. It's estimated that the gold, silver, and jewels taken during the Ganges Sawai's attack were worth somewhere between 325,000 and 600,000 British pounds, which would be around 91 million pounds today. After dividing the treasure among the crew, they weighed anchor and set a course for the pirate-friendly Bahamas. Upon arriving at New Providence, they posed as slavers and they bribed the island's governor into letting them come ashore. Every also handed over the battle-scarred Fancy and a small fortune in ivory tusks. While Every and his men relaxed, English authorities scrambled to deal with the political fallout from their raid. The attack had driven the Grand Mughal into a rage, and he responded by arresting several higher-ups in the English East India Company, which he believed had conspired against him. Fearing the cancellation of their valuable trade agreements, the company compensated the Mughals for what was stolen and vowed to bring the pirates to justice, and initiated the first ever worldwide manhunt in recorded history. The East India Company and the Royal Navy were soon hunting the seas in their search of the Fancy, and £1,000 bounty was placed on Every's head, which was a huge amount at the time. Every and his pirates scattered when they found out. A few of Every's crew were later rounded up and executed, but the vast majority escaped to Europe and the American colonies. Despite the massive bounty on his own head, Every eluded capture. His last words to his men were a number of conflicting stories of where he planned to go, likely intended to throw pursuers off his trail. Some believed he sailed to Ireland under the name Bridgeman, but his trail goes cold from there. Most believe he made a clean getaway and retired